Esterly. Oh, got it. Okay. So we're TBG partners, and we specifically are, see, Elliot and Adrian. A lot of you guys are recognized, or I recognize a lot of you because I graduated only a year and a half ago, which is wild, and have been working at TBG ever since. And while I was at UT, TBG's office was only a 7-minute walk from my studio desk. So I was an intern during that time as well. So it's safe to say I know TBG pretty well. And then Amy is stepping in for Elliot for the time being. So you want to introduce?
Yeah, so I am also in the Austin office, but I have a firm-wide role, and I manage our recruiting and hiring and our internship program, so I can answer any of your like high-level questions about that experience. I ran into Adrian at a career fair at UT, 3 or 4 years ago. I had known her in her previous life when she was at Keep Austin Beautiful, so it was really fun to find out that she was studying landscape architecture, and we were able to bring her on board pretty early in her studies. And so she's been with us for a long time. So we are within walking distance of your studio. So please, if you'd like to see our office space right now, when we're in stage 5, we're not really doing very many visitors, but as soon as those numbers come down and you can come over to our office, we'd love to give you a tour. Elliot is our managing principal. Hopefully he will be joining here as soon as he can get his technology figured out. And I can talk about just high level. What's your next slide, Adrian? Yeah, so we have 4 offices. Our Austin, Dallas, and Houston office have about 30 people, and San Antonio has about 4. Our project portfolio really spans the transect between urban and all the way down to conservation development, rural projects. And then we also do a lot of hospitality, commercial, civic, urban parks, multifamily. So all commercial landscape architecture, very, very little residential. What's next? So I mentioned that we have the 4 offices, and each one sort of has its own feel, its own kind of office culture, what they find fun. We have a great roof terrace in our Austin office that we've done. We've actually hosted some UT School of Architecture lectures and things there. So that's a great space for gathering, especially now when we're wanting to be outside and do happy hours. Our Dallas office is in Bryan Tower, so it's right in the heart of downtown. All of our offices are really great spaces for and have great walkability to cool stuff in the area. So these are just kind of our core values. You'll see these, hopefully, if you have a chance to visit our office or just from talking to Adrian and Elliot, you'll kind of see these exemplified. But being authentic, this is really, supporting each person's individual passions and supporting them in what they care about. So we've got a lot of people that are on boards and commissions, volunteering for nonprofits, doing internal research projects, which y'all are all really familiar with research right now, being in school still. So we want to capitalize on that, especially with interns and new grads, just being able to kind of continue in that path, things that they're passionate about, being inquisitive, just that natural curiosity. We have firm-wide learning programs, also just kind of organic learning that happens all the way from on a specific project, on your project team to, within a core office. And then being inclusive, I think, is the last one. I can't see because I have this grid here in front of it, but yeah. And that's what I mentioned about empowering each other, supporting each other's passions. People are pretty transparent about things that they care about, their specific career goals. And it's pretty common within the offices to kind of know what someone's working toward, and you'll see people supporting them. I mentioned that our work spans this rural to urban transect. If you read a lot of CNU, the Congress for New Urbanism, you'll see this kind of lexicon being used. But our project portfolio really does span this transect. I mentioned conservation development, master plan communities. So continuing to innovate and think sustainably about how our master plan communities are being developed. The urban core projects as well. I mentioned a lot of urban infill and multifamily. Okay, so how we work, again, that transparency and communication. This is a picture of our creative guidebook. And we use this sort of as a unifying communication piece internally to communicate our process, which is just the design process. This is something that you're all familiar with. It's nothing new. It's just the way that we sort of talk about it internally to kind of keep us all aligned and working efficiently and moving toward, our design work. So inception, discovery, development, delivery, and evaluation, that just follows from the baby seed of before we even are contracted on a project. What is that looking like? And then all the way to post occupancy evaluation, and continuing to look for new ways to research and study and observe and test in that stage of the project process. And then just how we measure success, these performance goals, performance factors, you are probably all really familiar with, but just having this sort of codified in our creative guidebook gives us that sort of checklist. You've heard of that checklist mentality. So just making sure that we're all kind of checking these boxes along the way, and that we're all working toward that common goal. Okay, so you'll see these embodiments listed on our website. I know that from participating in career fairs at UT that this is something that resonates. We've heard with a lot of people will come up and talk to me about the embodiments and how it resonates. And so we wanted to make sure that we had a slide in here for this. But this, along with our performance factors, just really looking at a project holistically and the role that we play on each project. And so this is sort of how this breaks down into scientists, so we have a director of sustainability looking at the, how are we dealing with stormwater management in a smart and scientific way? Designers, of course, always looking for ways to find creative inspiration. And then futurists, working in the urban core, you have to look toward the future. You have to think about transportation and code and policies and things that are shaping the way our cities develop. Composers is really just kind of aligned with artists in that beauty and understanding that people are using these spaces, and we want to create spaces that are that sing, and that resonate with people in a way that they want to keep coming back and have these meaningful experiences with their families.
Hey, Amy, I apologize for that. I did. I was able to crack the code here on this conference room computer. For some reason, it had to do a systems reboot right when I was trying to log on. So,
well, I'm so glad you're here. I will mute myself now. And I gave the firm overview and got us up to this point, so you can take it from here.
Awesome. Well, folks on the call, my apologies. It's 2021. You would think I would be able to join a Zoom call without any issues, but so it goes. That's why we always have a kind of a teamwork mentality at TBG, and Amy jumped in and didn't miss a beat. So thanks so much, Amy. The only thing I would add to this slide here, and I think we're going to turn it over to Adrian here in a minute, but we were fortunate this week to take a group of UT students to the Austin FC Q2 soccer stadium, which we were the landscape architects on. I believe it's a third year MLA class that one of my former professors at LSU is teaching site design on another soccer stadium, I believe in Albuquerque, and a mixed use development there. But when we were touring that project and sharing with the students kind of what was involved in that, complex stadium project, futurist is one of the things that we mentioned was a big part of our analysis and what really led a lot of the creative thinking on that project, because that project is actually, you don't see it now, but it's a catalyst project for the North Burnett Gateway Master Plan, which has been approved by the city of Austin. And it has rezoned and entitled this large district that effectively, for the most part, is an industrial and brownfield use currently. into what's imagined to be kind of a second downtown. And you can start to see some of that if you've been up to the Domain recently, and you see some of the high-rise and mid-rise towers that are going up. That's a direct impact of that master plan that's allowing that high density to come in. So a lot of the soccer stadium site work and design, we had to really understand, that in the future, that stadium will be surrounded by, transit, high density development, very mixed use, vibrant part of the city. So, it's one thing to recognize you have a site boundary and you need to, handle your on-site requirements within that boundary. But looking into the future, years and decades down the road is a big part of what we do, and a fun hat to wear when we're looking at complex projects like that. So let's jump to the next one. And this is just some examples of some of the work. I know Amy mentioned, all of our projects, which is very common in design today, really look through the lens of, triple bottom line and being accountable to, your environment, to the economic viability of projects and the social context in which the sites sit in. This is an example of a project in Dallas where we had a big hand in helping the developers understand kind of the economics of this development. There was a lot of mixed use surrounding uses around this particular open space area. And the developers were trying to figure out some clever ways to generate revenue to fund not only the construction of, but the maintenance of these open spaces and program parks to really sit at the core of the development. So we were a big part of them understanding how they could exercise those vehicles to get funding for the project. So it's a great mixed use project in the heart of Dallas. So we'll jump over to the next one. Same project, just starting to get down to the pedestrian level and understand some of the layers that went into that. Next slide. I know Amy talked a little bit about social accountability and responsibility in all of our projects. We're creating places for people. And what we do is ultimately we place make and we try to improve, the environments that we inherit, that we get to work on, but we try to, create these moments of collision and connection for folks to, interact with one another and interact with nature. And moving to the next one, this is again, that same project in Dallas. This speaks to a little bit of the, creative environmental sustainability approaches where we're capturing AC condensate from the buildings and then using that water to bring it into these water features and further enhance the placemaking for kids and others that want to cool off on a hot Texas day. And then environmental accountability, continuing on that vein, this is an image from Dell Children's Medical Center, a project that many, many years ago we were fortunate to be a part of. And at the time, it was the first LEED Platinum hospital in the world, which was quite an honor for Austin at the time. I think that was 2008-ish when that was being constructed, and has continued to raise the bar in terms of environmental stewardship in the realm of healthcare. And then I think this is just a really cute transition slide to turn it over to Adrienne to talk about one of our projects that she's actively an integral part of in the storytelling and creation of this next one.
Yeah, exactly. Thanks, Elliot. So we wanted to really pull back the curtain on how we think through the design process and how we think through taking what we learned and what you guys are learning right now in studio and really applying it. And by keeping a really strong narrative throughout as well. So this project is called Shelby Ranch, one of our many right now, but it's located in deep South Austin. So on this red dot over here. And one of the first things before we ever stepped foot on site that we noticed about this area is that although it is on the west side of I-35, it is in this really special pocket of the west side, because you don't typically think of farmland or really you don't think of farmland on the west side of I-35, you think about it on the east. But while farmland does define the east side, it has this little finger that goes across I-35, stretches to the west, and brings farmland soil, farmland topography, and really farmland culture and vibe to this whole little pocket. So we knew even before going that that might be a big part of our narrative. So our first site visit, when we actually got out there, this is what it looked like. These were the scenes. And when our client is going to buy this property, or when they did buy this property, they inherited all of what was on site. And so we saw a lot of opportunity here to reuse a lot of this material and to keep the same language of the site in and just kind of make it culturally sing based on what we had. So we started with this systems thinking approach, which you guys know very, very well from studio, but we kind of put our farmer hat on in this way and thought, if I was a farmer looking to work through this property and design this space, what would I do first? And we landed on, we would refresh and really lock in integrated water systems, because again, as you guys well know, we get huge ebbs and flows of water. And so we knew we had to retain the water in the best way possible because it's a pretty big site, and slow it and sink it to create a really healthy system overall. The next layer on top of that was, once we had kind of the water under control, we were able to design in an actual productive landscape. So again, with the farming narrative, actually incorporating fruit trees, cut flowers, grains, and because of that, also making space for the turnover of those things. So giving trees that drop fruit space to do that and not mark up concrete, which clients don't love, and giving them just enough space, enough breathing room to really thrive. And then the next layer on top of that was to add an active system within this site. This is a residential site. I don't think I mentioned that. And it is an apartment building. And so thinking about how an apartment building typically looks, and then walking through this process and how this one is going to look. So adding an active system to create this kind of regeneration and local ecology that feeds the entire property. So we were incorporating specifically chickens to help our soil system, and bees to, of course, pollinate, our favorite thing. And then again, with the farmer hat on, one of the most exciting things that we started to think through was reusing all of the materials that we had on site. So step one, prepping the land. We started to design a dry creek bed into the courtyard within this space. And then also kind of paired with this adjacent really large cistern that not only kind of stood for itself and created and grounded the design, but also allowed for that slow release and to impact the plants in a less kind of violent way, as our Texas storms tend to do. And so really creating healthier root systems and allowing things to thrive. When we were prepping the soil, I talked about fruit trees, things that get really messy. So making sure that first of all, our client knew what we were doing, but also that residents could be able to walk out their door and pick a loquat, get some pecans, get their lime for their mojito on the weekends, and making sure that was all kind of integrated into the system. And then using grasses to not only kind of give a nod to the wheat industry and productive grasses, but also create a lot of texture and movement among our more staple trees. Our chickens and bees were integrated in almost a permaculture-esque style. So really focusing on the details of what would make these two really integral parts of the system super happy. And so for the chickens, making sure that we were creating a plant palette adjacent that was not only supplementally feeding them, but also allowing them to really fend for themselves medicinally and have that option to kind of pick different plants and make themselves healthy. And then bees designing for nectar all year long, if possible. And so planting things that bloom super early, like red buds, and also plants that last really late. And then being really resourceful. So this is where the alchemy of, farm life comes in. You gotta look out your window and take a long, hard look at these things and see what you could do to save money and be super creative. And so this was one of the details that we're designing in. So using that old truck bed trailer and laying it over our dry creek bed and really incorporating it into a big part of the design. Retaining the language of what is literally on site right now, and making it feel just kind of part of the whole system. And then the breakdown, we kind of modeled it to be able to show fabricators how to make it ADA accessible and how to really make it viable. Then this other truck that we have on site right now, instead of, for example, buying a really large metal planter that would act as, the first stop for residents coming into the space, we decided to take advantage of this really large metal planter that we already have. And so instead of, spending the money purchasing that, now we have this vertical system that's really dynamic that we're able to do spectrum planting on. So have really dry loving plants on top, wetter loving plants below, because we will be, working through the detail of irrigating the entire truck. And so it just gives you another layer of creativity when you start to look around and reuse. These spools that look like, the cable spools that don't look super happy right now. We decided to try to reuse and create a really unique seating opportunity that felt gritty and industrial and very South Austin. And so, yeah, we're working through the details of that right now. And they'll be peppered throughout the site, depending how many we can salvage. And then in that same light, using wood pallets, a little bit more structurally sound than your typical wood pallet, but designed in a way to feel almost pop-up-esque, very South Austin again, and have plants integrated within the cracks to make it seem like it's been there a long time. So zooming out, we now have this, almost football-sized courtyard within these two kind of wrapped residential buildings that has this dry creek bed that meanders all the way throughout and hugs the different spaces in kind of a yin yang vibe. That's fed by the cistern, and then we were able to kind of layer on all of the other farmland qualities to make it an overall super healthy environment and ecology.
And sorry, I was going to jump in, but keep going, Adrian. I'll chime in at the end of this.
Go ahead, Elliot. I would love to hear your thoughts on this.
Well, I wasn't able to join the first part, but I know we looked at the development transect that we practice in. Everything from thousands of acres of conservation development to urban rooftops on high rises. And the common thread there is where we really try to evaluate and take on projects is to look through the lens of being able to add value and find projects with a purpose. And even those that may not have one initially, helping a developer and a client to find that purpose, create that value. And I think this project's a great example of that, where you guys have, if you're in Austin, you drive anywhere and you can see new apartment buildings getting constructed every day, right? And, we have a need for more housing. We have a need for affordable housing. And these apartments create community, but, and they're all going to have the same program. They're going to have a pool. They're going to have, some outdoor amenities. But on a project like this happens to be a client that we've worked with for years. And they have come to really look at us and lean on us to help them make this, next apartment community that they're going to build, really special and different in the market, and provide, community for the hundreds of folks that are going to live here, provide a place where they're really proud to live, even though it may be temporary, only a few years in their, life cycle. While they're there, they really invest and buy into, what this project is. So I think Adrian and the team have done such a great job to, really zoom out, look at the overall context, analyze, again, not just the property boundaries, but the region that this sits in. They came up with this great story of, agriculture as being, at the root of the history of the region, and really bringing in just a whole themed environment that will give residents ideally something to buy into and to be proud of to live in this community.
Yeah, exactly. It's been really fun. And then, zooming back into the courtyard and how the cistern, this was schematic design, so the cistern's not that big. It's not a monster, but we were dreaming big. And so how those water systems really create the foundation for everything else to thrive. And here we are, almost ready to go into, working through construction documents and making sure everything's set and sail, but a really lovely, kind of unexpected residential space in South Austin. And then if we have time, I can switch to Elliot. What do you think? Switch to the other one. And okay.
I think that'd be great. I was just going to add, one of the things that's so great about practicing in this market where we all live is we really ideally try to find clients that we philosophically align with. The one that Adrian just showed, that's a client that we've worked with for years. And we're growing together with each development that they undertake. But I think, it's also gotten to the spot where they've become good friends. And so there's this partnership between, both their overall, economic goals for the development and our goals of creating, really sustainable communities and placemaking. But the process becomes something that's really fun and enjoyable. In fact, Adrian, I believe the first rounds of design presentations were all held at beer gardens.
They sure were.
Where we get together and we've known each other for so long that it's just, it becomes, it's less of a job, and it's more of, just doing fun, creative exploration with friends. So I hope all of you are able to, at some point, find yourself in firms and in offices where you can, experience that kind of dynamic, because it completely takes the job part out of it and really makes it just an extension of your own personal passions.
Yeah, good ad there. This client is so fun. And actually, the client on this project that's now on the screen is equally as fun. We have not gone to beer gardens yet, but I'll make sure to suggest that next time. But this project is on the east side of town, so flipping to the other side. And many of you would probably know the east side pretty well. But there's there's a little bit of a divide on the east side, where we have the west east side and then the east side. And so this project, we thought it would be a great opportunity to marry the urban grit of the east side and the more hip, less grit side of the west east side. So and then of course in Austin, just bringing everyday nature, so people walking through all different spaces can experience a hefty amount of greenery through their daily lives. So we just wanted to show you really quick. Again, kind of pulling back the curtain of how we thought through this. The site is located in this really awesome triangle, the red triangle in the middle, which intersects with Pleasant Valley and 5th Street, and then also the railroad going through. And so we identified West hip. Again, this is only on the east side, but West is hip and the east grit. And then everyday nature to kind of pull them all together. But we thought about this spot as kind of the nix point in a river. So if a river's flowing, it's constantly eroding rock, right? And then when it gets to a certain type of rock, it has a tougher time eroding that rock. And when it gets to that rock, it falls instead. So it creates cascades because that rock doesn't erode as quickly. And so that's kind of what we saw of this spot in East Austin. Everything's kind of flowing. Everything's kind of, evolving and innovating. And then we get to this spot and it's almost like a drop off to the East Grit and really the heart of what is East Austin. And so we presented this yesterday to our clients, and we were looking at, the industrial design behind marrying those two kind of vibes. So the West hip and the East Grit, and what better industrial design to combine both of those than the Converse shoe. And so it really kind of brings everyone together in this really special way, and makes it's unisex. It makes everyone kind of on the same page, although they're on different pages. And so we pulled out design concepts from the Converse shoe that we could then translate to the landscape and see how we too could use this design to our advantage. So really what that equates to in our book, and given this is really, really early SD schematic design, but it equates to really heavy duty practical bones, like just really, really heavy feeling foundation, and then complemented with, edgeless, light and airy material, a lot of free flowing plants, lots of native plants, a lot of texture and flow to really complement that. And then just like the canvas on top of the rubber foundation, and then a pop of color. So that emblem in the corner, or a pop of texture and how that would be incorporated. So I'm going to fly through some of these, but you can kind of see how that starts to break down into actual spaces, creating food truck areas in these small leftover slivers of the urban landscape, and making the best use of not only for the residents and for the office spaces adjacent, but just creating an awesome East Fifth vibe that you want to be in and want to walk down. Yep. So I'm just going to flip through some of these. This is, again, same concept, just really fun, super early ideas of these spaces based on our narrative. So, and we learned, that's the thing that studio teaches so well. The idea of picking a narrative and running with it and having all of your design decisions pivot from that. And so yeah, it's nice to actually get it done and do construction all the way through construction documents at this point. But yeah, I think if we can open it up to questions, if you guys have anything. I'll go back to the Converse shoes so we can just look at that while we go through questions.
Yeah, that's a great image to pause on.
I agree, super fun. Surely there's some questions. Does anybody have any?
Yeah, I have a question. I just want to say I love that you really captured the sense of place in both of these projects that you just showed, just so authentically. I wanted to ask specifically the Shelby Ranch project. I love that you brought on chickens into the project and kept the truck. Were there any, was there pushback at all from the client, introducing more unusual elements like that?
That's a great question, Carly. And honestly, the client is so cool that the idea of chickens on site was a seed idea of theirs. So yeah, that kind of came from them. And yeah, they're just so incredible and willing to push boundaries. And it's not only because they want to be creative, but of course the product is going to stand out. The property is going to stand out dramatically within, you know, the Austin landscape. So yeah, good question. Because you will get client pushback, but I think that's to Elliot's point about being really good friends with these people and really being able to have like a solid conversation, not just in presentation mode, but actually, you know, face to face and just talking through issues. We get pretty far with that.
Yeah, and Carly, it's good to see you.
Good to see you too.
The one thing I'll add to that is that same client, and again, certainly not all of our clients are more than willing to bring suggestions of live chickens to our projects, but this one in particular is what we would consider, you know, pretty enlightened and forward thinking. To that end, on another project that we're doing with the same client, they've actually hired Adrian. We got to write a separate contract to be the lead snark designers for another one of their projects and push the other design disciplines to just think a little bit more creatively about, you know, what would make this project or that particular project more snarky, if you will. And I don't know if you want to add to that, Adrian, but that just gives you an idea of just how kind of out there this particular client is.
Yeah, that's a really fun one. Again, it's making the typical box product and making it just elevated dramatically. So the Snark project is super, super fun, and snark means like sarcasm, if you don't know. But it's been really fun to not only kind of conduct the other design disciplines and hear all of their amazing thoughts and ideas of how to actually get this built, because it's all kind of pie in the sky until you start going through construction documents, right? But we kind of landed on the narrative of the building making fun of its residents. The building has its own personality, and it kind of like pokes and prods at its residents in a really playful way. And so all of our design decisions are based on that. And of course, you know, it's limited to code and all the other things, but it's been really fun to stretch our creative muscles there.
Do we have other questions?
I have a question. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Awesome. So I'm a first year planning student and just curious if planners played a role in either of the projects that you shared about.
That's a great question. We have a whole planning team. They were not part of these two projects, but they have a whole kind of list of their own. And we do work alongside of them in a lot of projects, just not these two. They're typically, as you probably well know, the scale is just a little bit further out than the two that we shared. And so they're looking at more like master planning and transit corridors and complete kind of integration of the quilt, while we're looking at more of a particular part of the quilt.
Yeah, and I would say too, on the projects that Adrian shared, you know, on these smaller infill sites that range between 2 and kind of 5 acres, if you will, which is pretty common for the density yields that those projects are looking for. The planning is it's a little bit more formulaic. You're really trying to, you know, most efficiently fit in, you know, the boxes Adrian mentioned and the other necessities, which typically include parking and water quality. And there's a lot of the architects that design those buildings have done it enough to where they usually provide the planning services on those projects. But when we get to larger sites, we're typically integrally involved in helping to craft the planning on those larger sites, because there's more site constraints. There's a higher degree of you know, unique opportunities. But to Adrian's point, these we did not get an opportunity to plan. Good question.
Thank you. Thank
You
you.
bet. What else?
Yeah, I think I had a quick question. So I noticed kind of at the beginning of your presentation, you had mentioned the post-evaluation phase of a project. And I was wondering kind of what that entails for you guys. You know, kind of what responses do you get, or, you know, what kind of quantifiable evidence do you do? So if you could just speak to that.
Yeah, so great question. It's we don't unfortunately get to do post-occupancy evaluation on all of our projects. You know, with certainly like any firm, we're a business and we've got contracts that typically take us through construction administration, and then we're not contractually obligated to provide services beyond that. But where it really comes into play is even the projects that Adrian was showing, those are repeat clients. And especially for repeat clients where we're doing a similar development type. So when we start a new project with some of these folks, part of our due diligence for a new project is to go and assess what we did on the last one with them and what worked well, what didn't, and try to, you know, take lessons learned and apply those to the next one. So it's you know, it's not something unfortunately that we're able to do on all of them, but that's been a little bit of our, you know, the method to our madness to be able to go back, evaluate projects that you know, we've worked on with a repeat client, and then apply all those lessons and values to the next one. We do just out of our own passion, significant projects that we work on. You know, we'll do studio tours, you know, years after they've been in the ground for a while, because again, we work in a dynamic medium with planting and living systems. It's always cool to go back and check out, you know, a couple of years after something's been installed, just as an office, not as a contractual obligation to a client, but for our own education.
And our social media specialist, Catherine, also looked at, did a kind of full research project looking at how people use our parks and spaces through social media. And so was able to do, you know, design algorithms to pull apart kind of what she took as what were the most important spaces and what the uses were. And so through that research of very targeted spots, we were able to either, well, we were able to kind of understand where people put value in long views or like close-ups, or and so we used that a lot as well. That was really fun.
Yeah, great point.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. I definitely noticed that, like with a lot of firms, I mean, it's pretty rare to go back and do any sort of post-occupancy review. But I mean, like you said, I mean, social media is a great way of kind of capturing that activity and the success, I guess, of a project. So very cool.
I'm a second year urban planning student. I was wondering if any of the planners had any thing to do with the economic development of sites, or is that a question to a different position?
Sorry, can you repeat the question?
I was wondering if planners had any role in economic development of a site, or if that was a question to a different position at your firm.
Oh, no. Yeah, our planners certainly do have a seat at the table with EDCs and different communities. We've got one of our planners here is not, doesn't have a background in landscape architecture. It's pure policy planning. And so he's been very integral in a lot of different smaller municipalities engaged with their EDCs, economic development groups, in terms of, you know, rewriting whatever it may be, development codes, land use codes, and so on. So we do have that part of the planning practice. We do cover with a few key individuals across the firm. Does that answer your question? All right.
All right. Does anybody have any other questions before we end?
I have another one. I was looking up on your website. do y'all use mainly like Adobe Suites, or what kind of programs do you use, specifically AutoCAD or GIS or anything?
Yes. all
All the
the above. Adrian, you want to jump into that one specifically? I mean, it's a pretty big range.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's a good question. We definitely use Adobe Suite daily. And then, yeah, AutoCAD, Revit, and a few of us know GIS pretty well. And then just modeling. So SketchUp, and then SketchUp to Lumion, or Rhino, whatever.
Yeah, and for those in the landscape architecture program specifically, while the industry has historically produced most of the technical data, construction documents in AutoCAD, we're really pushing to try to trend more towards Revit, which the architectural community has been in for years. The site disciplines, civil and landscape architecture, are probably the laggards when it comes to keeping up with that technology, but we've I think made some good advancements in the last couple of years in that vein. So we're always excited when we've got students coming out of school that have a good background in both AutoCAD and Revit.
All right, any last questions?
I'm surprised you're not getting more, Adrian. You were just in the program, and you were able to kind of show off how many cool things you're already doing just a year and a half out.
I personally
like they can
loved
text
it.
me.
It's so fun to see you on the alumni side of things.
Wild.
I have a quick question. I'm sort of curious, Adrian, going from grad school, which, you know, is a beast to get through. How did it feel work-life balance wise, moving into a firm?
Good question. You are going to have a big exhale when you graduate. Yeah. It's definitely, you definitely have your days, but it's nothing like grad school. Thank God. That's not sustainable. Although, you know, grad school has a place too. Grad school is super fun. And you learn a ton, but yeah, you'll definitely have a big breathing room, a lot more white space.
Yeah, and you get to work with a team, so I'm sure that's nice. It's not all on you a lot of the time.
That's a big plus. And you get to meet at beer gardens and talk about ideas.
Great. Cool. Glad it's been positive for you.
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah, and I just add, Julie, being an old guy, just, thinking back to when I was in school, I loved any advice from professionals, and maybe Adrian can add to it. But as you guys are wrapping up, the intense, grad school curriculum and entering the professional world, think about the culture of the firms that you're interviewing with, and make that a big part of your decision-making process. Don't just chase places that look like they do cool work, because I can tell you, having worked on really exciting projects with either challenging consultants or clients, or in an infrastructure that's not geared around collaboration, it takes all the fun out of the exciting project. But you can take a mediocre project, and if you've got a great team of collaborators that are really interested in doing something purpose-driven, it's so much fun. So as you guys are getting out there and interviewing firms, think about that. Ask the hard questions about culture. Ask, what is the process of, the team set up within the office, and what would your roles be as a entry-level, landscape architect, urban planner, or architect? Because those are going to really set you up for success. And it's not something, at least I know when I was graduating, that I was thinking through and making a priority, as I should have been.
Yeah, and something that Elliot just said, which should really resonate with you guys, is he said, when you go out and you're interviewing firms, they're not interviewing you. I mean, it is, it's a two-way street, but make sure you keep that in mind, and make sure you come with a lot of good cultural questions as well, because that, to Elliot's point, Linda, a lot of firms are maybe not the big exhale that I was talking about, so it does depend what you choose.
Yeah, like people, there is no perfect firm, but there's a lot out there that are trying to do their absolute best to create great places for people. So, just keep that in mind. It's a really exciting time. I mean, there's the most markets, certainly in Texas, but even nationally are very busy right now. So I graduated many, many years ago when the times weren't quite as good. It was harder to find jobs, and you guys are on the other side of things. So super excited for all you guys that are trending towards graduation and entering a pretty robust economy to jump into and start hopefully working on some cool projects.
Yeah, and before we go, feel free, if you guys have any questions afterwards, to reach out to me directly or to Elliot directly, and we'd be happy to help.
Absolutely.
Yeah, thank you all so much for being here. It's great to see you both virtually. It's been a while.
Indeed.
It's so good.
All right. Well, if we don't have any other questions, I guess we'll sign off. But again, thank you guys so much. Really good to see you.
You bet.
Awesome.
Thanks so much,
Thank
Julie.
you guys.
Thank you.
Take care, everybody.
Bye, guys.